So, of all the weapons in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, I genuinely think that the Lance was the biggest winner of this patch by far. It added so many cool new things that really benefit the Lance more than they helped out other weapons. There's a cool new weapon itself, there's a cool new armor pieces, there's cool new skills, and there's cool new decorations that are all really good. So yeah, if you don't know me yet, hey, I am SunTide or Ralph. I'm a physicist and a huge nerd who really likes Monster Hunter and overanalyzes it way too much. I made a Python script that iterates through all the different weapons and armors and decorations and all that to give and print out the best possible builds. On screen right now is the best possible build for Title Update 2 for the Lance, the Kaktus Begierde. But before we go into too much detail about the actual builds, we're going to talk about all of the cool new things they added and what they mean for the Lance. So yeah, perhaps the first most exciting thing is actually going to be this new weapon, the Kaktus Begierde, which I believe translates to Cactus Craving, or so I've been told. And this weapon is actually really surprising. When I saw this weapon, I thought it would not be very good for the Lance, but it actually really is. The thing that's most surprising is it only has 310 raw, which is actually just really bad, especially for the Lance. The Lance is a raw focused weapon, so having such low raw seems like it will be a huge problem. But it's not, because everything else about it is just really good. So for example, in terms of sharpness, it has a natural 20 hits of purple. This can be expanded pretty well with things like Handicraft or Master's Touch to get it really high, and also has 40 hits of white as backup. It also has nice armor slots, so it has 1 4 slot and 2 1 slots. 4 slots are now really valuable, so that's great. It has 3 rampage slots, which means it can use any rampage skill in the game, including the valuable exploit skills, but also element exploit and Kushaldi or a blessing, which are nice side options if you want to use them. But where it gets really good starts with its affinity. 15% affinity is actually really nice for the Lance. The Lance, before you take into account skills like Bloodlust, is actually really hard to have high affinity values. And since it's hard to have high affinity values, it's hard to have high sharpness with skills like Master's Touch. Specifically, you can use things like Weakness Exploit to have high affinity to get 50%. You can use Critical Eye to get 40% more affinity. If you use both of them, you get 90% affinity, and the last 10% affinity has to come from somewhere. If you want to use Bloodlust, you can use Bloodlust, but other than that, you have to use like Agitator, which is a bit unreliable, or Affinity Augments, which are a bit inefficient. So having that extra 15% affinity in the weapon itself is actually really nice for damage and for sharpness. But it also has 48 fire, which is actually pretty good for Lance weapons. Again, the sort of problem though is that Lances don't really care about elements so much. But where it gets really unique and interesting is it also has 20 poison at the same time. And having some poison is always really nice. Because of the way poison works, having a little bit of poison is still always valuable, just because you'll get some really good early poison procs and get a lot of bonus damage that way. This is the first Lance that has 2 statuses. It turns out that the dual blades have always had some element status combinations in the ramped weapons, but it's the first time it's happened on a Lance. And poison is actually particularly strong in this patch, thanks to a new skill called Buildup Boost, which the Lance really likes. So what Buildup Boost does is it increases your raw by 10, 15, or 20%, depending on the skill level, whenever your attacks deal status damage. So if you don't know, normally when you attack, if you have a status weapon, you have a 1 in 3 chance of doing status damage to an enemy which are below the status. This means that 1/3 of your attacks get an extra 10% damage, which means with 1 skill point you get 3% more raw, which is a lot. 3% raw is huge. So yeah, Build-Up Boost ends up just being a really strong skill if you ever have any status on your weapon, which the Kaktus Begierde does. You can get Build-Up Boost from the Risen Chameleos gear, which unlocks at MR 110. So yeah, Build-Up Boost is really nice. If you use Status Trigger which is a skill you get from Gold Rathian gear. So what status trigger does is if you dodge, 100% of your attacks deal status damage, so that'll give your attacks a true 10% more roll. This can get even stronger. I don't count status trigger in these builds because I think that you're typically going to be playing this sort of counter blocking style of lance. At least that's what I play. But if you play dodge lance, then yes, this skill gets even stronger. Now beyond that, there's also nice new equipment pieces. So Buildup Boost is most efficient on the Risen Mizuha sleeves, so the Risen Chameleos arms, which also has some other nice things. So it has nice slots with 4, 2, 1. So 1 4 slot, 1 2 slot, and 1 1 slot, which is nice. And also has Chameleos Blessing. So in general, it's a pretty solid piece of gear that also has that new Buildup Boost. And has bonus foray. Other cool things, we get the Onmyo Teko, the Violet Mizutsune arms. So this is a side grade to the Betelgeuse arms, but it's a nice side grade. So this gives you 3 different 2 slots, plus Agitator 2, so 5 skills, plus some nice bonuses in Stamina Surge, which increases your stamina recovery rate, which is always nice, and Embolden, which makes it easier to enrage a monster, increasing your Agitator uptime, therefore increasing your Affinity uptime. And yeah, so it's a few other nice bonuses as well. So this is generally going to be better than Betelgeuse arms if you don't care about guard up. Betelgeuse arms also have bonus guard up, so if you want guard up, Betelgeuse arms are the most efficient piece. If you don't want guard up, Onmyo Teko is probably better. But the coolest gear they added for the lands in this title update is the Onmyo Sashiko, the Violet Mizutsune legs, which has so many great skills. It has a 4 slot, which is nice. It has Offensive Guard 2, which is really nice. And it has Weakness Exploit 2. This gives it 6 great skills on 1 gear, assuming you use 2 slots in the 4 slot. But yeah. Before this patch, our best leg pieces were the Tobikadachi Greaves or the Ingot Greaves, which both only had 4 skills. Other weapons, like the Longsword, could use the Silver Soul Reeds, which gave 5 skills, but 2 of them were Max Might, and the Lance never really liked Max Might. So by adding this 1 gear, the Lance can fit on 2 new skills. We get plus 2 skills, which is great. So yeah, the Onmyo Sashiko is just an amazing gear for the Lance. You should basically always be using this piece. We also got some really nice decorations, and this is actually really exciting for the Lance. In particular, because we have a new Handicraft Plus jewel, a 4-slot jewel, which gives 2 Handicraft Plus 2, or 20 more sharpness. And this is really nice because the lance is a high sharpness using weapon. You're going to go through your sharpness really, really quickly, and it's really hard to sharpen. Also, a lot of the really good pieces didn't have many 3-slot slots for decorations. So fitting in Handicraft was always pretty hard, especially because Offensive Guard was also a 3-slot jewel. With Handicraft being a 4 jewel, you can actually basically get a free point of Handicraft, which makes other lances become really, really strong. Before, the Crimson Sharpwing was a really, really good weapon because it had natively high sharpness. Now other weapons can really, really catch up. It's a huge win. We also get Chameleos Blessing 1 jewel, the Haze jewel, which gives us bonus points of Chameleos Blessing. The reason why this is valuable is because the poison weapons just end up being really good. And at Chameleos Blessing 3, we basically double our poison damage, and it's really easy to fit. The Lance always had a lot of free 1 slots, didn't really know what to do with them, and now you can fit Chameleos Blessing 1 quite easily. If you get up to Chameleos Blessing 4, you get Wind Immunity, which is also really nice for the Lance. Finally, they added the Chain Crit 2 jewel, which opens up some armor options. It's a nice option sometimes if you don't want to use the Archfiend gear. The real benefit of this is, I think, the Bloodlust builds. But yeah. Also, some other slight changes. We also get more augment slots, so we go from 5 slots to 6 slots, and Chain Crit has been renamed to Burst for some reason. It's a much better name, it's much better descriptive, but I'm still going to be calling it Chain Crit in this video because I am used to it. I'll probably switch around by next time. But yeah, So these are all the cool new changes. So we got Buildup Boost, we got the new weapon, we got Handicraft Plus, and we got, what's the last thing? The Onmyo Sashiko legs. Now before we get to the actual builds, so these are just a reminder of some of the assumptions I'm going to be making. I'm going to assuming you're going to do 120 hits before you sharpen, so really, really high sharpness values are going to be needed. I'm going to assume you want guard 1 but not guard up 0. I talked about that in the last video. I'm not going to talk about Bloodlust or Curious Crafting, I'm going to do those later on. Also no Foray, that's just a bit hard to calculate. But Foray will benefit the poison weapons and make them stronger. I assume partial uptimes with some skills, so I'm going to assume you're going to hit the weak points 90% of the time. It's really hard to hit 100% of the time, and usually you're just going to attack whatever's available, even if you always try to hit the weak points. And I'm going to assume monster is enraged 50% of the time, which I think is reasonable, if a bit low. Finally, I'm also going to assume we're doing the normal block and counter gameplay. So no dodge lance, so no status trigger, and also no skyward thrust spam, so no Wirebug Whisperer. That last one's a bit of a weird one. So again, some monsters are particularly weak to skyward thrust spam, which changes some of the builds. I'm just going to assume we're doing a normal poking playstyle. So yeah, without further ado, the builds. And the best weapon is, as far as I understand, the Kaktus Begierde. So on screen the whole time, I had a low element Kaktus Begierde build, which has the highest overall damage on average and does the most damage to the most monsters. It is optimal against 26 different monsters in the build that you see here, which is the low element Cactus build. This one is the Kaiser Crown, the Archfiend Armor Bowlow, the Risen Mizuha sleeves, the Sinister Grudge Tassets, and that new Onmyo Sashiko. Now again, you can see we get Buildup Boost from the Risen Mizuha sleeves. The Onmyo Sashiko just is so efficient. We get Mail of Hellfire from the Sinister Grudge Tassets, so you want to be on the red gauge, which gives you a high maximum roll. In general, just every piece here is highly efficient. Do recall, of course, that if you do use career crafting, Onmyo Sashiko having flinch-free 3 means you can always recycle those for better skills as well, which is one more nice thing about that gear. But yeah, so the one thing that makes the Kaktus Begierde really interesting is that we can fit Handicraft Plus on it to natively increase the purple from 20 to 40, and then use Monster's Touch to basically make that purple a last forever. So even though you normally only had 20 purple, the combination of the high affinity, all of the 4 slots to fit Handicrafted Monster's Touch, and all of those things basically give you on average 183 purple sharpness, which is really, really good. And all of that together comes to make the Kaktus Begierde better than the old Crimson Sharpwing. The high affinity, the new slots, the new decorations, and the new gear to fit all those things together. They all come together just to make this weapon so good. And yeah, that was genuinely surprising, because I thought that Lance raw weapon, the raw weapon's going to overtake it, maybe a poison weapon will overtake, but no, everything just works together to make this weapon so good. So yeah, but there are other variants that have higher element. So you can see here, this is the mid-elemental build. So this one is good if the enemy is a bit more weak to fire. You don't really need to build all of these builds. The low element build will serve you well enough. But yeah, this one basically has slightly more higher focus on element. Gets element 4 and raw 2 on the Kiru weapon. If you want even higher element for the enemies that are really, really weak to fire, so that's Gos Harag, Daimyo Hermitor, and Apex Arzuros, this weapon is your best bet. This build is your best bet. So this one basically tries to do its best to maximize the fire damage. Oddly enough, it uses the Kushala ramp-up skill, which I was surprised about, not the element exploit ramp-up skill. Basically, Kushala gives it high enough affinity to maintain its sharpness longer, and use element exploit efficiently. This build also uses the Silver Soul Mail, which is a highly efficient piece for fire element, which they added last patch. But yeah, so the Kaktus completely outclasses the Silver Prominence. Even in multiplayer, this weapon is just so good, and ends up being the best general use weapon. Now, if a monster is completely immune to fire or highly resistant to it, there's no real point in using the Kaktus. Rather, you want to use a weapon that has higher raw or higher poison, and surprisingly enough, the best poison weapon in this regard is actually the Ouroboros Serpentblade, the Remobra lance. Now this weapon got some really nice benefits from this patch as well. So before you needed 2 points of handicraft to get to purple sharpness, and because of all the 4 slots and the handicraft plus 2 decoration, we can get purple sharpness quite easily that way. We boost that up with Master's Touch, and all up that gives us really nice sharpness at purple and quite a bit more at white. It's a bit of a weird build, but just ends up being the best one mathematically, assuming you're going to do around 120 hits. It has a really nice raw and a really nice poison. And also, just like the fire weapons earlier, it also manages to fit 3 points of Chameleos Blessing, which gives it really nice poison damage. But yeah, if we want to focus wholly on raw, the best poison weapon ends up being Dubhe's Asterism, the Lucent Nargacuga weapon. This one benefits a lot from Buildup Boost, and also still manages to fit Chameleos Blessing 3. So Handicraft Plus and Master Touch Plus, you can start to see a trend. We just get lots of sharpness with our 4 slot decorations. The Crimson Sharpwing still has some use as a dragon element weapon. It's good against enemies that are weak to dragon. And this is going to be its new best build. It really benefits from some of the new pieces as well. It gets Onmyo Teko arms and Onmyo Sashiko legs. It doesn't really need that extra sharpness, so it doesn't use Handicraft Plus, it doesn't use Master's Touch Plus, but it likes the extra slots provided by the Onmyo Sashiko and gets some really nice benefit that way. It's a bit fallen from grace, but it's still good. It's still a nice weapon. A bit similar to it now is actually going to be an ice weapon, the Lunarcry, and this is another one that benefits from the extra sharpness stuff and the extra slots. This build is nice against the enemies that are quite weak to ice, and ends up being quite similar to the dragon build. It's nice if enemies are really weak to an element. Those are basically the main good ones, and then we get a few weird builds that are specific to just a few monsters, just a couple of monsters. We have the water builds. So we have one that has low elemental power, which is good against Flaming Espinas, Silver Rathalos, and the hardest monster of them all, Volvidon. This gives it some really nice damage against those monsters. It has a nice balance between raw and element. Specifically against Pyrochna Kadaki, because it is immune to monster exploit skills, you can use the Spiral Vortex. It's basically useful for this. But yeah, technically it is optimal. And finally, the last elemental build is the Thunder Lance, the Oppressor's Genesis, which is really only useful mathematically against the Shogun Centaur, which is really thunder weak. And the build you can see here. Shogun Centaur is one of the monsters where you're probably going to Skyward Thrust spam it, but technically, mathematically, this is good. Moving on, we also have some other status weapons technically as options. So the best blast weapon is the Basil Rocket Rookseerer, which you can see here. Now all of these status weapons really benefit from Buildup Boost as well, but they don't benefit as much as poison weapons, and the elemental weapons still outclass them. But if you do want to use a blast, for example, to break really resistant parts, the Basil Rocket Rookseerer is actually quite nice. For sleep, you can use the Elegant Fragrance. This one's quite nice. If the damage drop actually isn't that low compared to other weapons, so this one can be a sold option in multiplayer if you want one person in your team to use sleep and you trust your other party members to pick up the damage, especially if, for example, one is a great sword user or a longsword user with really high single hit attacks. And the last option is a Paralyze option. This one is less good. It loses a bit more damage than the sleep, but still nice, just for completion. But yeah, so with that being said, that is basically all of the builds for lands in Title Update 2 without using Dodge, without using Curia, without using Bloodlust. I'll do videos on those later on, hopefully. So yeah, basically means summary conclusions. On screen right now, you should be able to see the matchups for each lands is used for. But the main summary is that poison weapons are basically the new king. They are significantly stronger thanks to both Buildup Boost and Chameleos Blessing. In general, everything else got really strong as well by the combination of the Onmyo Sashiko, the Handicraft Jewel, and stuff like that. Whereas we also got the new weapons and Buildup Boost. This basically makes the Kaktus Begierde and the Ouroboros Serpentblade the new best lances, but the Crimson Sharpwing and the Lunarcry are now also strong elemental options if a monster is particularly weak to an element. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to go in more detail about curio crafting hopefully in the next video, both for lance and for longsword. I might release a weird video or two before that, but if you're still interested in all this, I hope you all subscribe, like, comment, and all of those good things. And yeah, I'll hope to see you all next time. Bye.